Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to today's reading from Brilliant as the Sun, a retelling of Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 4. Krishna fulfills all desires. We are going to begin chapter 12. Dhruva returns to the spiritual world. After ruling the earth for many years, Dhruva retires to the forest from where the messengers of Vishnu take him to the spiritual planet known as Dhruvalok. After narrating this, Maitreya describes the benefits of hearing this account. Verse 1. Dhruva watched Manu and the sages depart through the celestial airways. His great-grandfather's instructions had filled him with a deep sense of calm. Seeing that Dhruva had put down his weapons, a few bedraggled yakshas came out of their hiding places and tended to the wounded. Dhruva drove up to them. Place the injured yakshas on the chariot. I will take them to your city. Word reached the Yaksha king Kuber that Dhruva had given up his hostility. As he was assisting the yakshas, Dhruva heard sounds of drums, cymbals and trumpets reverberating across the field. He looked up to see a colorful procession of yakshas, charans and kinnars. Some were playing musical instruments, others carried an ornate palanquin. Others fanned the palanquin with yak-tail whisks, others danced and all sang. Praise to our king, the treasurer of heaven, glories to King Kuber. Dhruva came forward with folded hands to greet the youthful-looking Kuber. The god descended from his palanquin. He was strikingly handsome and effulgent. Blackish locks of hair framed his smiling face. He wore fine silk clothes of blue and gold and was adorned with priceless ornaments that shone brilliantly. Verse 2. He raised a hand in blessing. O sinless warrior, I am delighted to know that, instructed by your great-grandfather, you have given up your enmity. It is hard to let go of hatred and anger, so I am very pleased with you. Dhruva blushed. Kuber had no reason to be so kind toward him after he had needlessly slaughtered so many of Yaksha king's citizens. Dhruva began to apologize. Verse 3. Kubera put up a hand to stop him. Actually, you have not killed the Yakshas, nor did they kill your brother. The Supreme Lord is the ultimate cause of generation and annihilation in his feature as eternal time. Dhruva lowered his eyes. What a difference between Kuber and himself. How foolish he had been. Verse 4. Kuber saw the remorse in Dhruva's expression and smiled. I do not blame you, rather I commend you for shaking off the ignorance which momentarily clouded your intelligence. Only when we forget that everyone is eternally related to the Supreme Lord do we fall prey to the bodily concept of life. As long as we remain under the illusion, we are forced to continually rotate in the cycle of birth and death, accepting one material body after another. Dhruva bowed his head. What precaution can I take to avoid such ignorance in future? Verse 5. Kuber held out his arms. My dear Dhruva, come forward. Dhruva stepped close to the god, who embraced him and then held him by the shoulders at arm's length. May Narayan always grace you with good fortune, Dhruva. Continue to worship the Lord's transcendental form. He is the ultimate shelter of all living entities. Although not visible to material eyes, he resides in everyone's heart as the Supersoul. On that basis, remember the equality of all living beings. Verse 6. Only Narayan can deliver us from material entanglement. The material energy is one of Krishna's potencies, just as heat and light are the potencies of fire. It is thus not different from the Lord and is responsible for everything that happens in this world. However, Krishna is always detached from material affairs. The only way to become free of the material energy is The only way to become free of the material energy's control is to absorb yourself in Krishna's devotional service. Verse 7. Kuber folded his palms. My dear Dhruva, I have heard that you are Krishna's pure devotee. You are therefore worthy of receiving all benedictions. Ask from me whatever you desire. Dhruva lifted his eyebrows. Kuber was the treasurer of the gods. He could give him unimaginable riches. How though could he accept anything material from the god? Vishnu had also offered him whatever he desired. But after seeing the Lord, he wanted nothing other than his devotional service. To wish for anything else was simply foolish. Bowing his head to Kuber, he spoke in a choked voice. Verse 8. I desire unflinching faith and remembrance of Krishna in all circumstances, for this alone can deliver one from misery. Verse 9. Kuber held up a hand in blessing. So be it. The god then left Dhruva, ascending his chariot, headed back to his capital. The mid-morning sun shone through the tree branches, its golden rays dancing on the lake's ripples. Rainbow-colored fish darted about in the water, playing among the stems of bluish lotus flowers. Vidur and Maitreya sat near the lake, fully absorbed in their discussion. What did Dhruva do then? Asked Vidur. Verses 10 and 11, Maitreya said, for the duration of his reign, Dhruva performed many great ceremonial sacrifices to please Lord Vishnu, who is the enjoyer of all sacrifice and the awarder of all benedictions. As well as carrying out such kingly duties, Dhruva engaged constantly in hearing and chanting about Krishna. Each day he would sit down with the court Brahmins and hear recitations of the Lord's pastimes. His mind became fully absorbed in thoughts of Krishna, and he saw him everywhere. Thus, by Krishna's grace, both he and his citizens were always protected. Verse 12 and 13. Dhruva perfectly followed religious principles by honoring saintly persons and providing abundant charity to the poor and needy. The people saw him exactly like a loving father. He ruled for 36,000 years. Excuse me. He ruled for 36,000 years. When sense enjoyment came to him, he realized he was merely diminishing the reactions of his past pious acts. In order to burn out the results of any past impiety, he voluntarily engaged in austerities. Verse 14. Thus, although Dhruva's senses were perfectly controlled, in order to discharge his kingly responsibilities, he spent many years performing religious duties. As a result, he enjoyed economic prosperity and all his material desires were automatically fulfilled. Despite his worldly opulence, as soon as his son reached maturity, he gave him charge of the kingdom and retired. Vidur said, how did he remain detached in the midst of such affluence? Verses 15 and 16, Maitreya said, Dhruva was not bewildered, because he knew everything here is a phantasmagoria created by Krishna's illusory energy. Knowing the ephemerality of this world, he was detached from his own body, what to speak of his kingdom, wives, children, friends, army, treasury, comfortable palaces, and many enjoyable pleasure gardens. After his retirement, he went to a forest region in the Himalayas known as Badrika Ashram. Verses 17 and 18. In that sacred place, Dhruva purified himself by regularly bathing in the crystal clear waters of the Saraswati river. He practiced Ashtanga Yoga, which begins with adopting the correct sitting posture. He then progressed to the breathing techniques of Ashtanga, which enabled him to control his life air and withdraw his senses from the external world, and thus entered into complete trance. In that state, he experienced transcendental ecstasy. Tears streamed down his face, his heart melted with love, his body shivered with emotion, and his bodily hair stood erect. Absorbed in spiritual bliss, he forgot about the body. In other words, he became liberated from material bondage. Verses 19 to 21 now. At that time he saw a brilliant golden airplane descending toward him, illuminating all quarters like the full moon. On board were two beautiful associates of Vishnu. Their youthful bodies had blackish luster. They had 4 arms and their eyes were tinged red like lotus flowers. They had held clubs in their hands. Their dress was dazzling, and they were ornamented with helmets, necklaces, bracelets, and earrings. Dhruva recognized them to be Vishnu's personal servants and quickly rose to receive them. In his excitement, he forgot the etiquette for greeting guests. He simply folded his hands and chanted the Lord's name, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Verses 22 to 25. Vishnu's 2 servants could tell that Dhruva's mind was absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. They smilingly approached him as he stood with folded hands and bowed head and said, Dear King, we are Nanda and Sunanda, who waited upon Lord's lotus feet. We know that even at the age of 5 you satisfied our Lord by your strict yoga practice. That supreme person, the bearer of the Sharang bow, who has created this universe. So Sharang bow is the bow of Lord Vishnu. Who has created this universe, has therefore sent us to bring you back to him. It is very difficult to go to Vishnu's abode. Nevertheless, by the virtue of your austerities, you are able to go there. Even the great sages and gods have failed to attain that realm. Indeed, just to get a glimpse of the supreme abode of the sun, moon, and all the other planets, circumambulate it continuously. Lord Vishnu invites you to come here. Verses 26 and 27. Dear Dhruva, you wanted to attain a kingdom greater than any of your forefathers. You should know that none of them have been to Vishnu's abode. Your goal is achieved, for we are taking you to Vishnu's own planet where he personally resides. It is the highest realm of all and is worshipped by the inhabitants of all other planets in the universe. Please come with us and live there eternally. You have attained immortality. Thus you may board this excellent plane which has been sent by the chief being, the Supreme Person, who is glorified by select prayers. Verses 28 and 29. Dhruva was always alert to perform his devotional duties. Therefore, on hearing Nanda and Sundar's sweet words, he first bathed in the sacred Saraswati river and marked his body with tilak, and then he finished his daily worship of Vishnu. Finally, he went to the sages who lived in that region. He made his obeisance to them and begged for their blessings. On returning to the plain, he first circumambulated it, then bowed to Nanda and Sunanda. As he was so engaged, his body became illuminated and brilliant like molten gold. He then prepared to board the aircraft. Verses 30 and 31. At that moment, death personified approached him and bowed before him. Unafraid of death, Dhruva took advantage of his presence by stepping on his head to board the magnificent aircraft. He heard drums resounding in the sky. All the gods had gathered and were showering him with flower petals, and the chiefs of the Gandharvas began to sing his glories. Verses 32 and 33 now. As he was departing, Dhruva remembered his mother. How could he go alone to Vaikuntha and leave her behind? Understanding his mind, Nanda and Sunanda showed him that his mother was travelling in a similar aircraft just in front of him. Because your mother played an important role in your spiritual success by instructing you to take the shelter of Vishnu, she too is going to his abode. Verses 34 and 36 now. 236 now. Flying through outer space, Dhruva saw all the planets in the universe. As he passed the gods' abodes, they came out in the airplanes to honor him by showering him with flowers. He passed the highest planetary system where the great sages reside. Finally, he arrived at Lord Vishnu's eternal transcendental realm. This spiritual planet is the source of the sun's illumination, my dear Vidur. It can only be reached by people who constantly engage in welfare activity for the good of others. Verse 37, listen to the qualities one must cultivate to go to Vaikuntha. One must first be peaceful. This is only possible for those who have no demands for personal sense gratification. Neither those desiring material enjoyment, liberation from birth and death, nor mystic powers can be peaceful. Only those exclusively dedicated to serving Vishnu, who are surrendered to his will and who depend on his mercy, can achieve this peace. One must be equipoised, seeing everyone on the same transcendental platform. Such a person does not discriminate between living beings based on their material bodies or status. He sees everyone as a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. These qualities are cultivated by hearing from liberated devotees. He must be pure, in other words, not tinged by the influence of the modes of nature, like lust, greed, anger, or illusion. This is achieved only by constantly chanting the Krishna's holy names. Furthermore, one must please all living beings by engaging them in Krishna's living service. Finally, one must only form intimate friendships with the Lord's devotees. Verse 38, because Dhruva cultivated these qualities, he was able to attain the topmost planet. Anyone who follows in his footsteps can similarly go there. Vidur said, please tell me more about this planet. Verse 39, Maitreya said, Dhruva went to the pole star, which was subsequently named after him as Dhruvalok. As a herd of bulls walk around a pole to which they are tethered, so do all the planets in the universe unceasingly circle Dhruvalok. Such are the glories of Krishna's devotee, who by the Lord's grace exceeds everyone in greatness. Wonderful, exclaimed Vidur. Dhruva achieved incomparable prominence. Verse 40, Maitreya said, yes, so much so that when sage Narad saw his destination, he travelled to the Pracheta's sacrificial arena and joyously sang 3 verses while playing on his veena. Why was Narad so happy? Asked Vidur. He is Dhruva's spiritual master. You all remember from the earlier chapters that how Narad Muni guided Dhruva Maharaj when he, as a 5-year-old, went to the forest to do austerity and penances. Just as a father becomes joyful by his advancement in every respect, so the spiritual master was praises as follows. Not even by strictly following Vedic principles can one attain the same level of spiritual advancement as Dhruva. The chaste Suniti's son became so advanced in austerity that he was able to achieve the most exalted position. Verse 42, at only 5 years old, Dhruva went to the forest after being offended by his stepmother's harsh words. There I instructed him in devotional service because he carefully heard, assimilated and applied my instructions. He gradually attained transcendental love for Narayan. Thus he conquered the otherwise unconquerable Lord. Verse 43, he attained perfection after practicing austerities only for 6 months. For only 6 months. Not even great kings have been able to do this after performing penances for many years. Vidur said, other kings have achieved the same perfection, consider King Bharat. Maitreya reminded him that Bharat had taken 3 lives to achieve success, whereas by his serious determination Dhruva had taken only 6 months. Verses 44 to 45, Maitreya said, my dear Vidur, I have answered in detail all your questions about Dhruva's great reputation and character. Even exalted saintly people like to hear about him. Simply by hearing this narration, one can fulfill desires for wealth, reputation, and longevity. It is so auspicious that by hearing it, one can attain the heavenly planets or even Dhruvalok itself. Even the God like to hear this history. It is so powerful that it can counteract all one's sinful reactions. Verses 46 to 47, one of Krishna's names is Achyuta or infallible, and hearing about him all awards one whatever he desires. Since Dhruva is very dear to Achyuta, by repeatedly hearing about him, one gets the same result. It also helps one to become a great devotee and frees him from all misery. I repeat, one of Krishna's name is Achyuta or infallible, and hearing about him awards one whatever he desires. Since Dhruva is very clear to Achyuta, by repeatedly hearing about him one gets the same result. It also helps one become a great devotee and frees him from all misery. Know for certain that all ambitions can be fulfilled by understanding Dhruva's glories. Anyone can achieve his exalted devotional qualities. Those who want power or to be widely recognized as intelligent can achieve these aims by hearing about Dhruva. Vidur was incredulous. Just by hearing about him, all these goals can be achieved. Verse 48, Maitreya said, surely, but it must be done with great care and attention, both morning and evening, in the company of qualified, faithful devotees. Then it will certainly bear fruit. You mean we must hear it from a devotee? Verse 49 to 50, yes, the person reciting Dhruva's pastimes must be surrendered to Krishna. Vidur said, how can we recognize such persons? Maitreya replied, they will not accept remuneration for their recitation. When narration is performed without any professional motive, both the reciter and the audience become perfect. Is this the only criterion? Maitreya said, the audience must also have faith in such recitations and be eager to hear. Pathetic, challenging, or skeptical hearing will not bestow the same benefit. sorry, a pathetic, challenging, or skeptical hearing will not bestow the same benefit. The recitation will also be more effective if it occurs on a full or dark moon day, on an Ekadashi, on the appearance of the Shravan star at the end of a particular tithi, on Vyatipat at the end of the month, or on Sundays. Verse 51, this history of Dhruva bestows true immortality, which means understanding the real nature of the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead and one's relationship with Him. Those who become merciful protectors of others by giving them this transcendental knowledge attain the God's blessings and find all life's obstacles removed. Verse 52, Dhruva's transcendental activities are famous throughout the world. They are purely spiritual. Rejecting his playthings, he left his mother's protection and surrendered completely to God, to Lord Vishnu. My dear Vidur, I have described all this in detail and will conclude here. Please do not stop. Tell me about Dhruva's descendants. Maitreya smiled, my dear Vidura, it is noon now and you have not eaten anything since yesterday morning. Let us bathe, say our midday prayers, and then you must have some refreshment. Afterwards, I will surely tell you more. So how sublime and blissful are these chapters about Dhruva Maharaj in Canto 4. They really give like a soothing balm to our hearts. They're like a soothing balm on all our mundane ups and downs in life. And you really wish that you could carry on hearing these pastimes over and over again. So as been told in this chapter, the recitation of Dhruva's pastimes are very auspicious on a full moon or a dark moon day, on an Ekadashi, on the appearance of Shravan star at the end of a particular tithi, on Vyatipat at the end of month, or on Sundays. So one must be eager to hear these pastimes. One should not be in a challenging or skeptical mood. Then you won't get the same benefits. And it's also said that it should be done, can also be done in both morning and evening in the company of qualified and faithful devotees. Then it will bear the fruit. Was the advantage of hearing these pastimes? The results has been told in the same verses, 46 and 47, that because Dhruva is very dear to Achyuta, so by repeatedly hearing about him, one can achieve the same results. One can fulfill desires for wealth, reputation, longevity, and it is so auspicious that by hearing it, one can attain the heavenly planets or even Dhruvalok itself. They say even the gods like to hear this history. And it is so powerful that it can counteract all one's sinful reactions. So we conclude our chapter 12. Dhruva returns to the spiritual planet. And next time we'll begin chapter 13, Dhruva's descendants. Thank you for joining. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.